How many of us feel like sometimes you don't know how much detail to go into? You're not quite sure what's too much, what's too little. So this is a really good exercise to figure out all of the points that you've got to hit if you're doing a summary of something like this, for example. So first question, where did you draw the line to mark where the intro ends? Yes,
So we have a question here.
Okay.
Okay, can the thesis be in the middle of the introduction? Because it doesn't really land
It can be.
concretely at the end.
Okay, yes, so point us to where you think the thesis
Okay,
is.
so we kind of thought that, but Maria had followed me to London, reminding me of a prime fact of my life, that you can leave the island, master the English language, and travel as far as you can, but you are Latina, especially one like who so obviously belongs to Rita Moreno's gene pool. The island travels with you.
What do the rest of you think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that feels like the thesis, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then what does she do next?
Exactly my point,
She
right?
replies to it.
What was that?
She re-
thesis one.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, she replies to it with, "This is sometimes a very good thing. It may win you an extra minute of someone else's attention."
Yeah, but on the other hand, it can make you an island, right? So she's talking about the pros and the cons of it. So yes, I agree that the thesis is, if you are Latina, especially one like me, the island travels with you. And then she does go on to kind of expand on that point. So her thesis is not just one succinct sentence, it's sort of that whole area, right? Where she's kind of expanding on it. Yes?
Right, so it's not just that, it is kind of from Maria and then travels with you, that's the thesis, right? And then you
I think so.
Okay, and then you go down, as you go down that whole part where she kind of makes a point about it, that's still the introduction, yeah?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, all right.
So my next question was going to be, so I have this paragraph symbol right here, and I want us to write, paragraphs 1 through what? Where are we going to say it ends?
2.
2. So paragraphs 1 through 2 feel like they're the intro, right? That the second paragraph is sort of expanding on that thesis point. And so how can we put her thesis into our own words? What's like a little kind of summation of what her main point is?
You can be Latina, no matter where you are, no matter what you do, if you're Latina, it's still gonna follow you.
He's a poet and he didn't know it.
There you go, that's better.
Does that work?
Yeah. So basically this idea of if you're Latina, you cannot escape these stereotypes.
Okay.
That's kind of her main point, right? Okay, good. So now, actually, let's kind of do it in the order that the exercise is having us do. For those of you who got the conclusion, where does the conclusion begin?
We got stuck on the body.
We'll go back to the body parts. Okay. Where does the conclusion begin?
Second to last page.
Okay, and then which paragraph number?
13. Paragraph 13.
Okay, all right there, huh?
Yep, paragraph 13.
All right, I feel like 13 is still part of a body because it's like an illustration of an earlier point that she's making.
Would it start?
It's paragraph 14. Yeah.
We said 14.
I agree that it starts with 14, so it would be 14 through 15 is the conclusion. Now, why? How can we make a case for it being 14?
We said because it relates back to her culture and ethnic background, and like the racial prejudice.
That's big enough just to be
Yes, what else? What else? How do we kind of know, what signals do we see that this is becoming a conclusion here at 14?
So I think the signal word is yet, I think, because that's kind of a transition to how she is different from the other and how she's being perceived differently as compared to the other Puerto Rican girl, if that's how you pronounce it. And yeah, so I think that's why she explains how, because of her education or because of her parents, it was different for her. So I think that's how it signals us that the including part.
Good, yeah. And we also see sort of midway down this paragraph, she's like recapping the various stereotypes that she's already introduced and talked about, right? She's sort of doing that thing where she's, restating some of her main points or main ideas. So that's another good signal to us that we've entered into conclusion territory here. And then what does she do a little bit later in that paragraph? Like, if we can think about like the significance that she leaves us on, or kind of the concluding, like, important idea that she leaves us on, what is that?
The poem?
David.
Hopefully, God or Yahweh is bilingual, and that he'll hear what her
Yes.
complaints are.
I mean, that's the very last thing she says. But
Mhm.
even that is like an illustration of what she has said right before that, which I think is like the main important thing that she says.
So what was the question?
And that's a big for me.
What is her kind of last point that she makes to us, that's sort of the significance or the purpose of why she told us all these things? Yeah.
However, thousands of Filipinos without the privilege of an education or entree into society that I have, for them life is a struggle against misconceptions perpetrated by the myth of the Latin set as horror, domestic or criminal.
Good, so that's pointing out the problem, and then what does she say is sort of her, like, response to that problem? Like, in her kind of personal work in life. What is she gonna do about it?
She's gonna keep doing what she's doing.
Yeah, where's the line? Where's the line that explains that?
My personal goal,
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
read that part, somebody.
my personal goal in public life is to try to replace an old persuasive stereotypes and myth about Latinas with a much more interesting set of realities.
Good, so that is like her own, it's kind of her own personal, like, call to action, right? So a lot of times we talk about at the end of the conclusion, you can do a call to action, right? You can tell your readers, now that you've learned about this, now that you're aware of this issue, go out and do something about it. But she kind of flips it back on herself and says, now that I've told you and kind of showed you all of the stereotypical kind of issues that I've come up against in my life and how I've observed it, here's what I'm doing about it. Like, here's my thesis of my life's work, which is to go out and try to break down these stereotypes through the example of like my art and my poetry and the work that I do. Sean, did you have a hand up?
I think I just had an aha moment.
Good. What was it?
Well, so then we're going into it, it's always like the first part has to be this thesis, the second part has to be the body part has to be the conclusion. But in reality, in this woman's way of writing, she doesn't put it in there. She doesn't put it like that. She kind of, gives examples or gives the statement, and you can kind of come up with your own way of how you think the conclusion is. Because it could be many different ways, or even the thesis, right? But she kind of always has two. So it's not necessarily in stone, like in bold letters, this is the thesis. In bold letters, this is the conclusion. It kind of can be wrapped up in there.
She definitely has a very flowing, like, poetic way of expressing these ideas. But we still have an intro with a main point, we have a body with a conclusion, right? So
Right.
even if we can, like, kind of argue a little bit about where those lines are drawn, she still has all the elements. And
Right.
therefore, she's still creating, like, a cohesive, organized piece of writing. Yeah, good. Okay, now let's get into the body paragraphs and let's kind of like flesh this out. So this means that our body spans from paragraphs 3 through 13, right? All right, so now kind of rewinding to our first page, 45, where the intro starts and then on to the next pages. What's kind of the first chunk here? What does she do first? Yeah.
She kind of talks about her background, her cultural background.
Okay, yeah, so she says, our family lived in a large urban area, New Jersey, blah, 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 the microcosm of the parents' casas on the island, and then kind of what they did. And then, since we don't have much time, I'm gonna come right out and tell you that the first chunk goes from the beginning of paragraph 3 up until the end of paragraph 5.
Right on.
So, looking at that chunk of text, what feels like the main point going on there?
We were there one time, too.
We were gonna be like that, and then we stopped and we went down by there. It's fine, we can bring our back, we thought we were gonna be.
Yeah.
Basically, like how her culture, when she was younger, how it still affects her even now. Based on her way of living in her culture, I guess.
Yeah, good. So and then some like weird wall sounds happening here. So yes, all of that plus something else, right? So it definitely has to do with culture in that chunk of text. But what is she highlighting about culture? The different cultures she was a part of. Yeah.
Oh, never mind, sorry.
The way they dress.
Okay, yes. That's an example she gives of something culturally going on.
She's giving like examples of things that she had taken from her culture to her present.
Yeah, yes, yes, Karina?
I was just gonna say, the stereotypes of what they expect a Latina should be.
Okay, so she hasn't quite gotten to stereotypes yet, right? Because we see that in paragraph 6. That's part of the topic sentence of paragraph 6. But before she even brings in that idea of stereotype, she has to start off with talking about like cultural clash or misconception.
Doesn't she kind of give you a timeline of when she was a girl as she's growing up, what they were about, how to dress, how not to dress, how she's being seen, how she's perceived, and then she kind of ends it all up at the end when she's done. And you could say that, like, the mixed cultural signs have perpetrated certain stereotypes, so you either could say that, or you could say that it ends, you know, that she starts off with the 8 customs is how she goes through transitioning.
Yeah, so in 3 through 5, we're getting kind of examples of how like cultural misunderstanding happened, right? Career day, for example, or parties, like we know what one means in mainstream American culture, aka white American culture, right? Versus in the Puerto Rican culture within America. So that's sort of the first idea, is this cultural clash or misconception, that there's like a difference in how these cultures interpret things, right? And then, and she gives lots of good examples. And then in paragraph 6, what starts to be the topic here? Yeah.
Like the dress and how different, how the American culture sees Latino women because of the way they dress.
Yeah, good. Listen to this topic sentence, beginning of paragraph 6. Mixed cultural signals have perpetuated certain stereotypes. For example, that of the Hispanic woman as hot tamale or sexual firebrand. So, in paragraph 6, she's introducing to us the first category or the first stereotype that she's going to be talking about for a while, right? So how do we see this discussion of this stereotype? Like, where do we see that of like, they have to be sexy? Like, how far does that go in the text?
A while.
It does go a while.
So in one dimension, you that the media have found easy to promote. In their special vocabulary, advertisers have designed sizzling and smoldering as objectives for choosing for describing not only the foods, but as a woman of Latin America.
Okay, good. So, I mean, how far does that go? The
Halfway down
discussion.
6.
It's definitely through 6, but there's a couple more paragraphs that talks about
It
too.
goes in there for 7, because I thought 7 would be.
I think it goes all the way through 8 till 8 or through 8. Yeah.
Yes. So paragraph 6 through 8. How come? How do we know that?
She's still talking about it in paragraph 8. If she is decent, she must not acknowledge the man's impassioned words.
Yeah. So if you see structurally, right, paragraph 6 introduces us to the idea of a certain stereotype, right? The hot tamale or sexual firebrand. And then we go into the whole sizzling and smoldering as adjectives of choice for describing not only foods, but also women of Latin America, as Sean read for us. Now,
Okay.
why is that a problem? To say women are sizzling and smoldering, and then you see a taco ad and it says, this taco is sizzling and smoldering. Like, what is the problem of having those be the same descriptions? Yeah.
They're made to be objects of desire.
Yeah, so if you basically use the same language to describe a desirable woman as a desirable piece of food, you are putting the woman in a position to be like an object to consume, right?
Yes.
You're kind of in a way equating her with food and that she's there for you to consume because you desire her, right? So there we have like an objectifying situation, which is kind of at the base of, you know, what's the problem going on with those adjectives and the stereotype. Okay, good. So then in 7, what does she do? She introduced the stereotype to us, and then what does she do in 7?
Doesn't she try to?
She starts to introduce an episode that happened with her. So that's the introduction part that what happened to her, with her, in the hotel.
Paragraph 7. Take a look at what paragraph. I think that comes a little bit later. That's like paragraph 10.
Here's what so is 9 not the introduction to that?
But we're still talking about paragraph 7.
Oh, you're talking about,
Yeah, sorry. Okay, good.
Talking about basically like the reasons for why Latin women dress a certain way, and how it's not a sexual, what's it called? It's not a way to be desired. It's more of, you know, the fact that it's because of the weather and things like that.
Yeah, so she rewinds and says within, you know, the culture, right, the way that she perceives this culture and the way that she understands the culture, you know, this is what our dressing means. And here are the, like, social rules and customs around dress and how you can act to the opposite sex, right? There are very, very clear-cut boundaries of what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, and what happens if you break the rules. She kind of, you know, takes it out of the American context and looks at it in sort of the original cultural context. Okay, good. So, and then we go on, it's more about how they look, right? And then finally at the end of 8, she says, this guy was trying to kiss her, she didn't want to kiss him back, and he says, I thought you girls were supposed to mature early. My first instance of being thought of as a fruit or a vegetable. I was supposed to ripen, not just grow into womanhood like other girls. So what's she objecting to there? Like, why is she upset about the way he treated her?
Because he's comparing her to a piece of food, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, quite simply, right? It's another objectification, right? Like, he is seeing her as, like, someone who's supposed to be interested in his advances, right? Because she's supposed to mature early. She's supposed to, like, automatically want him, right? Which she doesn't. Okay, so now we are entering into paragraph 9. We have a new topic going on. What's going on? I'm just going to tell you it's about 9 through 10. 11.
Really?
Really? You have to say that?
She's giving us
Touche,
answers.
yeah.
Yes, it's through 11 because we get a new stereotype in 11 that we're talking about. So 9 through 10, and then 11 through 13.
Yep. There you go.
Oh, question.
Sure.
So is the body portion of what we're looking at right now, what we're going through, is this like the I for the acronym P.I.E?
No, because the pi happens each body main point. So the essay as a whole has intro-body conclusion. And then for each one of your main, like, supporting arguments, in your essay it's probably about 1 paragraph long, in her essay it's several paragraphs long. This would contain
Pi,
pi. Just this point, each one of them would contain pi.
3.14.
Probably not exactly like the way that we see it in an academic essay, because it's not an academic essay, but within each one of these main points, she has all those elements, even if they're a little bit out of order or a little bit kind of, they're all later. She has the main point she's making, she has the I, which is like usually her personal experience or stories, and then she has the E, she has the like interpretation of those stories, how they relate to the misconceptions or the stereotypes that she's bringing up. Making sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, we're almost out of time, but we can totally make it through this. 9 and 10. What's our kind of main idea going on here?
Professionalism, it's the way of, it's examples of it, right?
Yeah, we've got some personal examples of things she goes through. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Was she pretty much talks about her personal examples of people objectifying or just stereotyping her under a certain category.
Yeah. Okay. So let's see. How can we put this into our own words here? What's kind of the main point going on, David?
She works with a lot of haters.
Or she just like happens upon them out in the world, right? Like she's
Yeah.
even traveling to different countries at this point, and they're all sort of like just showing up to her.
She just looks good and people are yeah, she doesn't
Ditto.
let people advances, they give her attitude, and it just sounds like even the women are making like off-base remarks about her, the way she's dressed.
So maybe she's a really good-looking woman.
I assume she is.
But that goes back to her stereotype, what you're trying to say, that just because she's looking at why everybody gotta look at me as if I'm a sex symbol.
Yep.
But she
Why
also,
can't they look at me as a woman, right? That's what the whole thing is, I'm a piece of fruit or a piece of meat or whatever.
but she was also mistaken as a waitress, which
Yes.
that doesn't make you beautiful.
So that brings me to 11 through 13.
Oh.
What is the topic of 11 through 13?
I
Yeah.
have a question.
Okay.
So half of 11, the, part of 11, it still continues with what she was talking about in paragraph 10.
Yes, it's a smooth transition, but then she does get to her main point. It's bringing in another stereotype
The
that Latina's
politicians,
face. Yeah.
yeah, they make good domestics. This is another facet of the myth of the Latin woman in the United States. Its origin is simple to deduce. The work of domestics, waitressing, and factory jobs are all that are available to women with little English or few skills. The myth of the Hispanic mental has been sustained by the same media phenomenon that made Mama with Gone with the Wind America's idea of the black woman for generations. Maria, the household maid, or the counter girl, is now indelibly etched into the national psyche. Right? That's her whole.
Good. So she introduces to us this next stereotype, right? That all Latinas work as like maids or like cooks or waitresses or something, right? Like these menial or these domestic jobs. That's another stereotype that she has come up against in society. So notice what she does. She introduces the stereotype, and even in that portion that Sean read for us, then she kind of starts dismantling it, right? She says, yes, it's true, a lot of Latina women have to work these jobs because that's what's available to them. Because of their kind of like social mobility, because of their education level, because perhaps they were immigrants, right, who had to come here and sort of start from the ground up, that is what's available to them. But at the same time, we can't say that that's all that Latina women do or are capable of doing. And so she like goes in and breaks out of that stereotype. And what's her point about the media? Why does she talk about Mammy from Gone with the Wind? Like, what's the point of all that?
The media,
Yeah.
well, they influence people about this negative stuff, how Latina women are supposed to be portrayed as maids, cooks, street walkers, and things like that.
So, because the media like mostly portrays these stereotypes, whether consciously or subconsciously, we tend to think that reflects reality, right? right? And so it reinforces within society these stereotypes because we see them everywhere, right? So somehow we accept that, oh, this is normal or this is probably true. You know, even if it's subconscious, right? Even if you don't think you have that stereotype, the fact that if you see it on TV and you go, oh yeah, that's normal for me to see on TV, it tells you something about that you've accepted that, right? That you haven't paused to say, wait a minute, like maybe this is a little racist. Okay, so we have all of our body points here, and then we go into our conclusion, and we have 3 minutes left.
OMG, you're gonna use that 3 minutes?
Of course we are. So as you can see, this kind of outlining, seeing for yourself on the page where the intro, the body, conclusion are, and then looking into the body and figuring out what her main points are, can directly help you to write that summary. So now, if you had to write a summary on this, you could, introduce title, author, and main point, your thesis, in the first sentence of your in your first sentence of your summary, and then basically spend a sentence explaining each one of her major subpoints, and then a sentence talking about what conclusion she comes to. Okay, any last questions, thoughts, ideas, Karina?
So, part of the homework, we were supposed to find quotes on it. So would we have to find quotes like on each type, like a paragraph in each one?
No, because if you look in the worksheet total, you're finding 4 quotes from each source. So, 4 quotes times 2 sources is 8 quotes at all. So your choice is, within that, you need to find a connection with one of your other sources. So say you're doing like Farewell to Manzanar and you're doing this one. And we could talk about maybe like how Jeannie is sexualized, like in her exotic costume, versus like how Kofor gets sexualized as a hospital, right? There's a connection. And then you find a quote that talks about each of those points. Other questions? Yes?
So you said 8 quotes, meaning, I thought we had to do one or the other as far as the homework went, page 17 or page 13.
You do. But it asks you 4 times to find a connection.
Uh-huh.
Each connection, 1 quote for each source.
Oh, I see. So one that's comparing contrast and one that's similarity, or one that's 4 that's contrast and 4 that's similar, right?
Not necessarily.
Oh.
4 points of similarity or connection. And that's, or for example, like sexualizing women. That would be your point of similarity, right?
Right.
And then you have 1 quote from Kofor talking about sexualization of women, 1 quote from Farewell to Manzanar. And that would be like 1 chunk of it. And then you have to do that 4 times.
Okay.
Yeah. So just follow the